The key concepts that the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, or the UNFCCC, were founded on was the recognition of damaging CO2 emissions in the atmosphere, and the need to stabilize greenhouse gas concentration at a level that will prevent dangerous anthropogenic interference with climate systems. As well, the UNFCCC acknowledged that this should be achieved within a timeframe, with implemented legal instruments that the Conference of Parties, or the COPs, may adopt. Since the UNFCCC has been an international instrument for climate negotiations, the extent of issues that it has covered have expanded due to the interconnected challenges of responsibility and the means of states to adapt to adverse conditions and mitigate CO2s. This has proven to help and hinder common goals and the original principles of the UNFCCC. Where it is seen to help the UNFCCC is highlighted through the growing number of states working blocs that have cohesion on a range of different issues. The Alliance of Small Island States, or AOSIS, despite important differences in language, culture, and geography, was formed in 1990 as a negotiating bloc within the UNFCCC, as it was realized early by these individual states that they faced many common challenges. The most important, in reference to the position on the UNFCCC, is their limited political and economic clout, however, their disproportionate vulnerability to the adverse effects of climate change. It was predicted early by AOSIS countries that if adaptation and mitigation measures were to fall short under the UNFCCC, the extent of loss and damage to AOSIS states would have extreme ramifications and threaten the mere existence of a select few. The commonality was the key driver that formed the AOSIS coalition and continues to present AOSIS as a collective as climate change continues to be their greatest threat. Furthermore, the member states of AOSIS are among the lowest emitters of CO2 emissions in the world. As displayed in the table in 2010, the average CO2 emissions of AOSIS states was the equivalent of 0.58% of world emissions. Singapore, being the greatest emitter in the bloc, is still only responsible for 0.13% of the world emissions, ranking them 79th. This common understanding has brought the states together as the least responsible for atmospheric damage, however among the most vulnerable. As a result, there is a common perception among the AOSIS states that those who are already developed and are responsible for the greatest CO2 emissions should pay. This has led to the support of economic instruments such as the grandfathering theory, as well as cohesive support for numerous principles of international law including responsibility of the state, polluter pays, common but indifferentiated responsibilities, and respective capabilities, as well as international equality. The common circumstances of the AOSIS bloc states are directly linked to why AOSIS holds such an influential negotiating position on the UNFCCC. Some of the main factors that can be deciphered regarding AOSIS's negotiating position on the UNFCCC are the truth and justice of AOSIS's cause. This can be referred to as the state's vulnerability. It creates a sense of unity to a common threat, backed by scientific evidence and a strong skilled leadership, positions AOSIS well for negotiations. Linked to this, AOSIS gains moral leverage on the UNFCCC due to the extreme sensitivity of island states to climatic change. Furthermore, AOSIS was able to forge coalition with larger blocs and states, as they have highlighted the vulnerability of countries the world round, using their own exposure to climatic hazards as a direct example. With the leverage gained by these factors, AOSIS has been able to have relatively high political influence in the submissions as well as the ability to push for further equality for decision makers and the decision-making process within the UNFCCC. In 2007, on the lead-up to the 4th Workshop of Dialogue in Vienna, AOSIS put forward a submission calling for practical steps that would need to be taken to enhance implementation of the Convention, to assist and enable all parties to contribute meaningfully to the achievement and the ultimate objective of the UNFCCC. This area of conciliation and coordination has been a focal point for AOSIS. Success in this can be recognized through the Small Island Developing States, or SIDS, obtaining a seat on the Bureau, a position that until then had been the privilege of the 5 UN regional groups. Since the first Conference of Parties, or COP1, The AOSIS negotiating position has transformed and fragmented, similar to that of the UNFCCC itself. In the Bonn meeting in August 2009, Papua New Guinea and Tuvalu, members of AOSIS, were reported to have opposing views on land use change, and forestry, accounting on eligibility. The forestry sector thus appears to be one of contentious issues between SIDS. This highlights that multilateralism among member blocs and the UNFC itself are gaining larger scope and new challenges arise. The argument that fragmentation of the AOSIS agreement and cohesion on certain issues has been detrimental to the overall position on UNFCCC is analysed and contested by academics, arguing that individual contributions have reiterated and reinforced the AOSIS bloc position. Despite AOSIS states having vulnerabilities across the board, they are all affected in different ways, making it hard to define a common denominator of interest. Furthermore, all states are under different domestic pressures, whilst trying to uphold international responsibility, known as the two-level game. Due to international responsibility, common interests across AOSIS are adaptation measures and CO2 mitigation. However, due to domestic pressures, one can see common interests differ. For example, the existence of some low-lying atoll states such as Maldives, Kiribati, and Tuvalu have their very existence threatened. Other states, such as Cuba, face serious impacts, but may be able to adapt. These states find the UNFC interests in aid, adaptation, and technology. Countries such as Papua New Guinea and Suriname have interest in payment compensation for their tropical rainforest as part of a UN program regarding the reducing emissions of deforestation and forest degradation, or REDD. Singapore, as an example, has a large harbour and their interests lie in bunker fuels and maritime transport. These competing interests mixed with domestic challenges such as unstable governments, the import and export of unsustainable fuels in seeking development and eradication of poverty, as well as the interconnectedness of politics and corporations, make it difficult in identifying common interests among AOSIS. AOSIS acts as a voice for many small states that have common but differentiated responsibilities. With a better understanding of climate change and its implications, as well as the negotiating process, individual states may be better aware of their interests and how they relate to the group within the UNFCCC. As discussed, the challenges posed to the negotiation process of AOSIS alliance, such as divergent interests, uncommon ground, and the interconnectedness of the two-level game, are managed because individual states are presented with the greater threat of climate change. Island states recognize the success of the alliance as an instrument in gaining equality to their individual threats within the UNFCCC negotiations.